Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I would like to talk about voice leading. I'm going to talk while I get adjusted here. I'm using a different camera setup here to see if it works any better. So on guitar, we don't think about voice leading maybe so often as pianists do when we're starting. Eventually, I think we think about it equally, depending on the player, of course. But we learn these chord shapes at first usually and memorize them and just move them around the neck. This still gives us voice leading even if we don't think about it, but we're going to talk a little bit about how you can start addressing voice leading, or maybe if you already are thinking about voice leading, how you can capitalize on that and make some decisions that make sense and know what you're doing a little bit more. So very briefly, not as long as with the last video, I would like to just mention that down below in the description, I have a Patreon link. If you'd like to support the channel, I would really appreciate it. It would help me get content out more often. There's a longer explanation why on the previous video if you're curious. I'm going to try to release a video every few days for this week after I started the Patreon link, just to see what that's like in terms of a time commitment. Because even though these videos are only about 20 minutes or so, I have to put in considerably more time to actually get this all together in terms of setup and recording and editing, even though I don't do a lot of editing. So anyway, if you'd like to help out, there's a Patreon link down there. There's no tiers or anything. It's just if you feel like helping, you can put it in an amount that you would like to put in. All right, so in terms of voice leading, what is voice leading? Let's just start with that in case we're unfamiliar with the term. When we play a chord, a chord is built of multiple notes, right? A minimum of 3 notes to make a chord. Less than that, we have an implied chord. In a 7th chord, we would have 4 notes. Less than that is an implied 7th chord. But in terms of the textbook definition, we have to have 4 notes to make a 7th chord or 3 notes to make a triad. Each one of those notes we could call a voice, right? Imagine if I play this minor 7th chord, imagine someone singing this note, someone singing this note, 4 people singing those notes. So those are 4 voices in that chord. That's why we call our chords, our fingerings that we know, that's why we call them voicings, because they're different voices that make up the chord. Voice leading is where you lead from one note to the next to give you the sound of another chord. It's kind of intelligently or purposefully changing the notes from chord to chord and leading one voice to the next. What we get very often, like I said, is just memorizing chord shapes. I was going to do it quietly, but... Right, so I would memorize this chord voicing, memorize this chord voicing, memorize this chord voicing, use the same one that I just used for G, but up 2 frets. Big advantage for us doing it this way is that moving to different keys is very simple, right? We don't have white keys and black keys to worry about when we transpose our chords. But it can remove some of the creative process that might be nice to add in by just saying my voicing for 7th is always going to be this. So I'm like always going to use this for G7, or I'm always going to use that or that. And it's just nice to have options. If you like the sound of players like Jim Hall and Ed Bickert, there's a lot of players where you hear their chords and it's like, oh, what are they doing? That's not a voicing I'm used to hearing. Very often it's because of how they're moving from one chord to the next using voice leading that they like instead of just a chord shape. So the 2 things to take away from that are that every chord you play is made up of individual voices, and you have control over how to move those notes, those voices from one to another between chords. But you have to make that decision instead of just playing a chord shape. So what we're going to deal with is, just to get into this, I could make more video than one about this if it would be helpful. But we're just going to really use one chord voicing just because I know everyone has different backgrounds. I don't know how many chords everyone knows here. One thing I do on this channel, or I try to do very often, is just use voicings that are, quote unquote, beginning voicings, because I want everyone to be able to see what I'm doing more easily. So let's use the one I was just doing. This minor 7th chord, if you don't know it, is 5th fret, 7th fret, 5th fret, 6th fret. And we're going to be moving down to this G7 voicing, which is 3rd fret, nothing on the 5th string, 3rd fret, 4th fret, 3rd fret. To C major 7, which is 3rd fret, 5th fret, 4th fret, 5th fret. Okay, now what we're going to do, this is also, didn't mention it at the beginning, but this is also going to be partially about rootless voicings. And I'll explain why you might want to do that in a few, because I want to get right to the voice leading. So within every chord, we need to get the strongest sound of the next chord that we possibly can, we want to include the third of that chord. You don't have to include the third of the chord, but the third will give you the sound of the chord more than any other note, arguably the same or more than the seventh. The third and seventh together are the two notes that define the chord quality that you're dealing with. So when we talk about major seventh, minor seventh, dominant seventh, the third and the seventh are the two notes that dictate what the chord quality is, what kind of chord it is, major seventh, minor seventh, and so on. But the third, the reason I think of this as more important is because the third is the one that makes it major or minor. I'm sure a lot of you know this if you've watched my other videos. We've talked about this in the past. So if I just take this note, as soon as I get to this note B, in this voicing that we were talking about, this is the note on the third string, that gives us the sound of G7 right away. So if I just play this, the root and the third, then it sounds like we have a chord change to G. So what if we know where the third is in the 5 chord, we just have to find what the note is that will lead us most cleanly to that third in the 5 chord. So let me try to say that a little bit more clearly. So if I know that the third is on the third string, in this case, coincidence, the third is not always on the third string, then I'm going to take whatever is on the third string or closest in the previous chord. And in that case, it's going to be the 5th fret of the D minor 7. Right? Now, all the other notes are kind of at our disposal to change however we like and create our own voice leading. This will also give you some chord types that you might not be used to playing, so it's very good for ear training as well as learning new chord voicings. So this is going to be done in every voicing that we come up with as we're experimenting with different chord voicings. So first, let's take the 4th string, and we're going to move this back a fret now, along with this note. You know what? One quick thing first. Just moving that note. Let's do that first. So without even using the root. Let's also end with the 1 chord so we can hear the resolution. So that, even though I'm just changing 1 note in this D minor 7 chord, it definitely does not sound like D minor 7 anymore. It sounds like we're going to the G7, even though there's no G present in the chord at all, because our ear is so used to hearing what it's like to approach that note of the third of the 5 chord. There could probably be a whole separate video just about how the harmony works between a 2 and a 5 and a 5 and a 1, but to keep relevant here about just the voice leading, I want to move past that for now. Okay, so that was just moving the string that we were talking about to get to the third of the 5 chord. So now, back a step, let's take the note on the 4th string, and we're going to move that back as well. Every note now that we move will accompany the one that gives us the third of the 5 chord, or in other words, B, the B note that goes in G7. So that's what we would get. Very nice sound, very smooth voice leading. Let's take it with the root for a second, or let's just keep D in the bass for both of them, actually. And what we get is now an opportunity to think to ourselves, here's something we can use in the future. What we have when we do this is D diminished. And as we talked about in the last couple of videos, any one of these notes can be the root because it's a diminished 7th chord. So now we know that that's a good substitute for the 5 chord. And let's see, in this case, it actually is the one we were talking about in the last video where it gives us a 7 flat 9 sound. Not really a fingering I would use very often, probably, but hey, it's a way to do it. All right, now let's move the top note down. That one maybe doesn't give us as strong as a movement, does it? Let's do it with G as in the root so we can hear it. Let's see, wait a second. Were we keeping, I think I'm gonna need to do it that way for now. One more time. The G does kind of give us the sound of it, doesn't it, as soon as we hear this. But without the root, since we're testing all of these without the root, it's not as strong as a movement from 2 to 5, is it? The reason is that this note, if we keep the F, the top note that we're playing on string 2 of the D minor 7 chord, this is actually the 7th of G7 when we get to that. So for example, if instead of this voicing of G7, if I played this voicing instead, we have root, 3rd, and 7th. So this note, as soon as we move this back, instead of that, we would get, and it becomes, it's not a 7th chord anymore at all, it's a 6th chord now. Wait a second. And having a low root down there does help us kind of force our ear to hear that harmony in the context of G. So that might be one that you want to move, or it might not be. We are taking the 7th out of G7. We're taking the 7 out of the 5/7 chord at that point, and the resolution is not as strong. That's not a bad thing, though. It's just something to note. Now, let's move all of them, I guess. That would just be moving every single fret back. So we did just the note to approach the 3rd of the 5 chord. We did just the 4th string to accompany this one. And now if we move all of them, this is I think this is a very cool sound. And this is going to be, I think, the next in the substitution video series that we're doing. I think this is the next one I'd like to talk about as well, which is not a coincidence. I was already thinking of that. And I guess it is kind of a coincidence because I forgot this was going to be happening when we were doing this voice leading stuff here. So with the root now, we're going to have the low G and then C major 7. So very cool sound. Just in case you're curious, if we take just this chord, we have relating to G, we have the root, we have the flat 9, we have the 3rd, and we have the 6th. And what these notes are, if I just take these by themselves, are E major. It's an E major triad. So we're basically playing E major over G. And that resolves pretty nicely there. That one actually resolves nicely to, let's see, to a 9th. So if we have, and then we can go to A7 afterwards, and then maybe D minor 7. So a lot of options, and I guess I should mention, since I think the video is going to be too long to go over what I just did there, you can go, if you don't know this, by the way, on YouTube, you can go on the top and click the 3 dots, or tap it, and there's a speed option. You can slow things down if you're not aware of that already. It can be really helpful in these kind of videos to slow things down. You can also pause it to check out fingerings and stuff. So after going down the way we just talked about, moving everything down from the D minor 7 chord, and then I went to C major 9, and then I went to A7 sharp 5, and then I went to just D minor 7. This looks like F major. It's just a rootless D minor 7 chord. And then I went to, did I add that on top? I don't remember. Let's do both just in case. This, just those 3 strings are, is a G7 flat 9 with no root, because I wasn't playing that. Top note would be the 6th or the 13th. We call it 13 in this case because the note has the chord has a 7th in it. And if I add the G on top, then that's just the root. This is actually another one of my favorite chords. Very pretty sounding chord with some nice voice leading as well. All right, so one last thing. I told you that I would talk about rootless chords a little bit, about why we're doing that. There's more than one reason, but really the big reason is that if you play in a group, or if you want to play in a group at some point in the future, you are going to want to know how to play chords without the roots. You are especially going to want to know how to play chords without the root, with the root in the bass, with the bass as the lowest note. So like this, for example, this low G right now is the same as the open first string on a bass. This is a very low note. If you don't know this already, the guitar, when we read music off the staff, every note that we play sounds one octave lower than any other instrument playing that note. So if you play this G on the piano, it would not be written as underneath two ledger lines of the treble clef. It would actually be one octave lower. It would be the G on the bottom of the bass clef in terms of how it sounds, because the guitar is a transposing instrument. Everything we play on the guitar sounds one octave lower than the way it's written on the page for us. So imagine if you're playing this note and the bass is walking maybe then you're going to get, as you're playing this note and the bass is playing the exact same note, then you're going to get this together, these two notes at the same time, and then you're going to get all of these very close, you playing that bass note and the bass playing it. One, it makes things sound muddy. Two, it forces the bass player to play certain things. It can be great. I play with a bass player who often solos very high up the neck, so I'll end up playing these low notes for him during solos, and it kind of fills out the sound. So it's not that you never want to do it, but you will make friends who are bass players. You will make friends out of bass players if you learn to leave the root out of chords. Let's just put it that way. So as you're doing these, you could record yourself just going 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Record it on your phone or something, and then practice the rootless voicings, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, with the voice leading that you already are practicing. You could also look up a tone generator or get a freeze pedal. I have a freeze pedal that I like to use sometimes. Any way to get the roots down there. Alternatively, you can just play them with the roots. Or even with a tritone substitution in the bass if you wanted to. But let's say we weren't doing that for now. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. It's going to create some challenging fingerings, perhaps. That one is just from going here. But as soon as we have the G in the bass, it's a bit of a stretch. So if you can't reach that, or if you don't want to, you can record yourself playing the bass notes, use a tone generator, anything like that. All right, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. Hope this is helpful. I think the next video I'll be doing will be another substitution video. Definitely want to hit the one we talked about here with the, you can also do it like up here. This kind of a cool sound. So that will be maybe a little bit more intermediate, advanced-ish, I think, because that's a hard one to hear at first, I think. Anyway, I think I'm going on a little too long now. So I hope you all have a great day. One brief reminder as well, if you'd like to support the channel, get videos more often and such, check out the Discord link in the description. It would help me a lot. And I hope you all have fun practicing wherever you are, and enjoy the rest of your week. Till next time, take care.